Thank you, Joe. June 3rd, 1983. That was my last good hair day. Every time I go see a barber, I think he just doesn't appreciate how hard I work to grow this. Why is he cutting it off? I really do. As I visited with many of you, I had an opportunity to spend just a minute with some of you before we started. I got to tell you, I was just extraordinarily impressed by the work you're doing. It's an honor for me, really, to be here with you, and I thank you very much for the opportunity. This training is sponsored by Johnson & Johnson's Caring Crowd website. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have heard of Caring Crowd before today? Okay, so that's why they sponsored this, so that after today you would be able to say, I've heard of Caring Crowd. We'll tell you a little bit more about it. I want to get to know you a little bit better. And this is a large group, and I'm grateful to Jeffrey and the team for organizing a large group today. But I want you to pull out your device, any device that you may have that's connected to the internet, and visit this URL. This kind of doesn't look like a URL or a website, but it is. So if you'll just type into your browser q1.devon.today, there's a little survey there that I want you to just answer a few questions for me. Okay, so a bunch of you have already answered the survey. Keep answering. Okay, so 73% of you are employees at 75% now. Ooh, 77%. So a vast majority of you are employees at nonprofits. Some are volunteers. A few are board members. Most of you say you have not donated to a crowdfunding campaign. That is interesting. That is interesting to me. And the vast majority of you say you have not yet run a crowdfunding campaign. Raise your hand if you're one of those few who has done a crowdfunding campaign. Okay, I just want to know who my experts are in the group as we go through today. You can help me here. Okay, but a lot of you have something in mind. That's good. That's good. Well, that helps me to know a little bit about who is in the room. And I appreciate you taking a minute for that little exercise, because in just a couple of minutes, that really helped me get to know who's here. Before we get into this, I want to just tell you a little bit more about myself. This picture's not very big. It's hard for you to see in the back, and I realize it may be hard to recognize me, but in this picture, I'm the hobbit on the right. When I was 11 years old, back in 1976, and everyone who's good at math is now doing some, but when I was 11 years old, this dam near the city's a generous word, Rexburg, Idaho, failed. It was the first time that the dam had been used, so it was the first time they'd filled the reservoir, and the dam failed. And so it flooded everything downstream, and the town of Rexburg, which is downstream, and about 80% of the structures in Rexburg were damaged or destroyed by the flood. And that summer, it was happened in June, that summer, communities around the West sort of rallied around and, loaded up buses and went to visit Rexburg. And so one day that summer, my father came to me and said, Saturday, I'm going to Rexburg to dig muck and mud out of basements. Do you want to come? Now, as an 11-year-old, that sounded like fun to me. So I said, sure. And I remember we got on buses about 11 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, got on a bus 2 o'clock in the morning, rode through the night, arrived at dawn, worked all day until it got dark, and then got back on the buses and came home. I remember nothing of the trip home. I was exhausted and passed out. But, I was an 11-year-old kid. Some of you may have noticed I'm not an especially large man now. Picture me as an 11-year-old. Well, you don't have to imagine. This was a photo taken that day, and for 40 years, I didn't know this picture existed, let alone have access to it, but a friend gave it to me recently. But that cute little girl there standing in the front is me with the shovel. And that's my father in the background. Now, you'll notice that the shovel I have is empty. That was the condition of the shovel most of the day. It's not that I wasn't trying, it's that shovel was really big and heavy. So the fact is I probably didn't do much good. I probably didn't earn my donut. But I felt like I had done good. And it proved to be life-changing, life-defining. I vowed that I would never miss an opportunity to serve. Now I did. I missed lots of opportunities to serve and help other people. I went on to have a successful finance career for 25 years, and I don't want you to think I never did anything good, but that wasn't the focus of my life. But when I got fired from the best job I'd ever had as the chief financial officer for a global food and beverage company, I channeled that enthusiasm of my youth and launched a new career, helping other people do good. So, I want to share one little anecdote with you before we get started. I know I don't look like it, but I regularly run up a little canyon near my home. I live right downtown in Salt Lake City. But Salt Lake is sort of like Jackson. It's a small town. And so from my downtown condo, I can run up into the wilderness. And so on one morning, as I was running up the canyon, I came around a corner and I saw a mountain lion dart off into the trees. And then as I came around the next bend in the road, I saw 3 attractive, middle-aged women walking down the canyon toward me. And I thought, I should probably warn them about the mountain lion. And, I'm such a fast runner, I knew I would just have an instant to warn them. And as I passed, I just blurted out, "Beware of the cougar." Yeah, it took me about 10 minutes to realize I might have said that another way. So it will be my goal today to communicate with you more effectively than that. We have a little bit more time together, but despite the fact that we're going to be here until about 4 this afternoon, we have a lot of ground to cover. So, now, when we talk about crowdfunding, what most of us think about is probably one of these 3 websites: GoFundMe or Indiegogo or Kickstarter, right? Are all of you familiar with at least one of those? Probably now it's GoFundMe more than anything else, right? Kickstarter was what really was, for many of us, the first exposure, but now I think GoFundMe is probably bigger now than Indiegogo and Kickstarter put together. Probably none of you should be using any of those websites. Let me be clear when we talk about crowdfunding today, and we'll come to that. There are lots of different types of crowdfunding, and so this word is confusing as much as it is helpful, right? So certainly we're all in this room thinking about getting donations through crowdfunding, but you're probably aware that entrepreneurs and bands and musicians and authors and filmmakers are using websites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo to raise money by essentially pre-selling a product. And so that's That's another kind of crowdfunding. We often call that rewards-based crowdfunding. And then finally, in the United States, there is a whole legal construct now for doing investment crowdfunding. And there are a few of you for whom that is a very relevant concept. And I don't know who else, but a few of you that are doing things where you have some semblance of a business or an asset, it may make sense to even think about investment crowdfunding. We won't focus on that today, but I just want to highlight that aspect for a few of you that may find it relevant. Now, again, the language around crowdfunding is really, it confuses me sometimes, right? And so I want to just take a minute to kind of disambiguate what we're talking about. Sometimes in the world of crowdfunding, in nonprofits, the term crowdfunding is not frequently used anymore. That term is less often used, but it's still what we're doing, right? It's not necessarily what we call it, but it's still what we're doing. So a lot of what I will talk about today is often called peer-to-peer fundraising. Have you heard that term in nonprofit circles? Yeah, that's sometimes we do, direct mail or direct appeal kind of crowdfunding things. We've got, sometimes people used to call it social media fundraising. I don't hear that term as often anymore, but I used to hear that. And then, of course, you do, fun runs, walkathons, that sort of thing. Now, if you're just charging admission, if you're just charging a registration fee and that's all, that's probably not really a crowdfunding opportunity. But if all of your racers are trying to get their friends to pledge and raise money for you, then that's probably a crowdfunding, kind of a peer-to-peer kind of activity. And then, of course, more and more now there's talk about integrating a traditional direct mail campaign with online activities. And so some of what we'll talk about today is relevant to that. Let's try not to be too bogged down around definitions and just think about how we can apply what we learned today. The key takeaways, I'm going to give you sort of a grand strategy for doing a campaign. I hope you'll think about doing that. For some of you, it will be really a good strategy. Others of you will just find tidbits throughout the day that you'll be able to apply to what you're already doing, okay? Now, crowdfunding has incredible potential, really. There's an investment crowdfunding campaign in Bogota, Colombia, of all places, that raised successfully $200 million to build a skyscraper. There was a guy a few years ago who invented a cooler that had a battery built in and speakers and a blender. So you could take a party to the beach in your basically one device. He sold enough of them to raise $13 million on Kickstarter. How many of you remember the Ice Bucket Challenge? Right? How many of you did the Ice Bucket Challenge? Anybody in the room? A few of you. That was a remarkably successful event. By far, the most successful nonprofit crowdfunding event in history. And ever since, people have tried to recapture that magic, including the ALS Association, which has tried to recreate the magic every summer, and it doesn't come back, right? It was a one-time thing. But wow, what a phenomenal success. Oh, if we could figure out how to do that on demand, right? So what is more realistic to expect? Investment crowdfunding campaigns, I see a lot in the $100,000 range. The average might be $200,000. And so again, there are a couple of you that might find that relevant. rewards and donations campaigns probably only average around $4,000 or $5,000. On Facebook now, Facebook is one of the big players in crowdfunding now, which is kind of weird to me because they weren't at all a player when I started teaching this. But they're kind of their default little mini crowdfunding campaign amount is, what is that? Does anybody noticed? $200, yeah. So, the crowdfunding size, I don't want you leaving thinking that you take what I teach you today and raise $5 million, okay? If you want to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars through a crowdfunding campaign, we need to go deeper than I'm going to take you today. I'm not going to give you the skills to do that today. And I apologize if you came expecting I was going to teach you how to raise $5 million. Key point. If you don't take away anything else from today's discussion than this fact, I want you to remember this. The crowd is as hard to find as Sasquatch, right? As Bigfoot, as a Yeti, right? As the abominable snowman. That's what we're talking about. It's about that difficult. There have been sightings, right? We all saw the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, right? So we think it's out there. But really what's going on with crowdfunding is the crowd is your crowd. It is your network. And that is the key thing I want you to take away from today is when we're talking about crowdfunding, we're talking about how we reach out to our networks in a way that is effective. One key thing about crowdfunding is, of course, trust. I'm not going to overemphasize that today because here in America, we're pretty trusting. But one of the key things to just keep in mind in the back of your head as we go throughout the day is how do I establish trust with my audience, with my community, my network, that I will do what I say I will do, I will use the money the way that I said, that I am legit, that I am who I say I am, etc. When we talk about crowdfunding, I really hate this analogy, but I haven't been able to come up with a better one. If you have any suggestions, let me know. But kind of the way that we might wage a war is kind of the way we might organize a crowdfunding campaign. And the first step is to do some reconnaissance, to sort of figure out what's going on, to get the lay of the land. And we might spend 4 weeks easily doing reconnaissance, trying to understand who in our network might help us, what resources we should be using, just getting educated, right? Coming up to speed. I'm hopeful that this training helps to accelerate that, but it won't replace it. The second phase is preparation. And I will warn you now, we will spend most of the day on preparation. That is the hard work, right? And then the ground war, and in a real war, I think usually the air war is launched before the ground war, but in crowdfunding we reverse that. The hand-to-hand, face-to-face combat happens first, and then we do the air war. And we'll talk about that throughout the day, so that you actually will start raising money before you launch your campaign. Another key fact I want to highlight kind of call to your attention. We'll be doing work before we actually start our campaign in earnest. Now, we're going to work in groups today. Groups should be about 5 or 6 people. And I have no magic for the way that we create groups. But I need you to self-organize into groups now. If you came with peers, if you came with a colleague, I would encourage you to stay together. I would say that. But feel free to form groups however you choose, but I will insist that we have no more than 7 and at least 5 in every group. You guys did an excellent job of forming groups. Now, I worried about your ability to form groups, and you really came through. Like, you're professional group formers. The next challenge is even harder, because this next challenge would be really easy at about 3:45 this afternoon. After you've had all the training and you know everything there is to know about crowdfunding, then it'll be really easy to pick a crowdfunding project. But I need you in your group to figure out the crowdfunding project you're going to work on today. But you need to do it before you are crowdfunding experts. So that is the challenge. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to talk amongst yourselves about things that you want to crowdfund. Almost everybody came with an idea, right? So you're going to have to compete a little bit, lobby for your ideas, and then one way or another, your group's going to have to choose a project to work on today. Okay? Does that instruction make sense?
Yes.
Okay, take it away. Oh man, you guys group you really group well. I commend you. I commend you. You group with the best, world-class groupers. I want to go around and just give each of you like 15 seconds to describe your project. I know you want 5 minutes to describe your project, but 15 seconds, okay? Who's ready to go first? Who can okay. In 15 seconds, what's your project?
Our project is entitled Art is the Answer.
Okay, art is the answer. That's a great, okay. What's your project?
Our project is raising scholarship funds through the state Title 29 plan for low-income resident children. It's been proven that expands their whole expectation of further education.
Great. Okay, I want to try and gather your attention again. You're grouping too well. Okay, so what's your project?
We are focusing on food insecurity matters in the Mississippi Delta region.
Excellent. Oh my gosh, thank you. Okay, in your project?
A youth camp for at-risk youth, school readiness, encouragement, and trying to keep them doing a safe place where some of our parents are working. Great project. Over here.
So will you repeat this group?
I couldn't hear it.
Oh, sorry.
It was a youth camp for at-risk youth.
A youth camp for at-risk youth
School readiness
for the summer.
for the summer.
So what's your project?
Sexual assault legal assistance and shelter. Sexual assault legal assistance and shelter.
Excellent. Okay, what's your project? Okay, Project Elevation, mentoring children through the arts, ages 7 to 17. Okay, over here?
So the organization is called One Shred of Hope, and basically purchasing and retrofitting a house for several people with disabilities in Oklahoma.
Okay, great. So a very specific project. They're going to retrofit a house for people with disabilities, for a family or other people with disabilities. Community.
With everybody having some various
Okay, great. And your project here?
Our project is Good Shepherd Children's Home. It's a children's home for orphaned, marginalized, and abused children in Honduras.
Okay, excellent. So it's a orphan and abused children in Honduras. Yeah, great project. And your project, last project.
raising money to offset the initial cost of healthcare, indirect cost of when someone gets cancer or goes on dialysis or goes on something like this, they usually have to quit their job or things like that to help them until insurance and other things kick in.
Okay, so it's a kidney treatment program, right, that you're trying to fund? Okay, great. Now, you've done all that work of choosing your project. I do want to now give you very explicit permission that at any point today, if you want to choose a different project, you don't need my permission. You can just change your project. And as we talk about crowdfunding, over the next hour or so, you may decide. I don't want to encourage you to switch, but I want you to feel that you can if you choose to. Now, we're going to start by doing a quick preliminary assessment to figure out how much money you might be able to raise for your cause, for your project, using crowdfunding strategies that I will teach you. And it really comes down to 3 metrics. It's really simple. It's how many partners, how many champions, and how many boosters you have. And let me define those terms as I mean. These are not defined terms, right? If you talk to other crowdfunding experts, they won't use these terms. These don't have meaning outside of Devin's world. But for the sake of our discussion today, we'll use them, okay? So a partner is someone who is equally committed with the most committed person to the campaign, the most invested. Does that make sense? Right? So usually that's a fairly small group of people. It might be 3, it might be 2, it might be 6, it could be 12. That would be rare. It's unlikely to be 100. Does that make sense? Okay. They will attend all of the planning meetings. If someone's not attending the planning meetings, by definition, they're not a partner. Okay. Now, your champions, and sometimes I'll call them fanatics, but the people who are like really, really committed, but aren't in the planning meetings. They're not participating at that level. They're not fully committed. So they're probably volunteers. They may be employees of a nonprofit whose job is to do something else. Maybe it's programmatic, maybe it's the accountant, but it's someone whose job is not fundraising, right? They may be a champion for this work. And then finally, there are boosters. Now, the boosters are people that you didn't ask to be a champion, but who were all along willing. And when you get rocking and rolling and your campaign is going, they show up, right? They engage and they're advocating on your behalf, and you think to yourself, why didn't I ask her to join me earlier, right? So what I want you to do now is to take like 90 seconds in your group to figure out how many of each you think you might be able to rally for your project, okay? So take 90 seconds and figure out how many there are in each category. Okay, so did you do the math? You've got some counts, some estimates, rough as they may be, right? Okay, so here's the deal. Okay, I need your attention up here. Okay, so each partner typically is worth about $2,000 in fundraising. And each champion, on average, is worth about $1,000. And the reason I say that is the champions are really, they're as worth as much as partners when they show up, but if they don't show up, they tend not to show up at all. And then boosters, about $500 because they usually join the party late, right? Because that's the very definition of a booster, okay? So I want you to take a minute and do the math in 1 minute. 60 seconds, do the math and estimate how much money you can raise given the number of people you think are going to help you. Were you able to make your estimates? Were you able to do the math? Okay. So you know how much money you can raise now. So let's do a little more talking. Before we're done, in the next hour, we're going to figure out how to increase that number a little bit, okay? Our next activity, and we really have to be good about ending our group time for this to work. So please work with me on this. But we're going to have, over the next hour, 6 different discussions about your project to try and establish as objectively as possible. And I realize that objectivity is going to be difficult, but that's the goal, is to be objective about the project on 6 different measures, okay? And I'm going to ask you on each measure, and by the way, the little number on the screen in the lower right-hand corner, that's the page in the workbook that we're on. And it may be helpful, some of you have already figured that out, but some of you, it may be helpful to keep up in this section especially, right, to take some notes. But what I want you to do for each of the next 6 topics, I want the group to self-assess a score on a 5-point scale, with 5 being the best. And I want you to be as objective as you can be, and that always ends up being a little different in every group, but be as objective as you can be about these things and give yourself objective scores as much as you can. And no, we're going to do this one at a time. So the first one I want you to think about is the face of the campaign. Now, this is not a fixed thing, right? The face of your campaign is someone you choose. So right now, you can choose the very best person for that campaign. Now, the very best person for that campaign is probably the most authentic beneficiary of your campaign, right? To put forward someone who will be a recipient of the program to talk about why they're excited about the program, the changes it would make in their lives, etc. So think about whether you have that kind of person. Now, it could be an animal, right? It's a little bit difficult, but it could be a puppy dog. It could be a horse. But it can't be something without eyes. Literally, right? It has to be someone or something that has a face, literally. So it can't be a computer, can't be a car, it can't be a building. And that's going to be a challenge for some people who are thinking about that, but it needs to be a face. Okay, so take 3 minutes for this conversation. Did you come up with a score? Okay, if you didn't come up with a score, make one up now, because we're ready to move on. Okay?
All right.
So now we're going to talk about urgency. Okay, I need your attention. I need your attention. We've got a lot of work to do today, so I need your attention. So the urgency will command a tremendous amount of attention in a crowdfunding campaign. I want you to think about the last time there was a natural disaster, right? I always think of the Haiti earthquake because it was so incredibly devastating. 250,000 people died, and $1 billion materialized almost overnight. It was amazing. Like we saw with the, just last week with the Notre Dame, right? It literally took 3 days to raise $1 billion, right? Because of the urgency created by the event. Now, a lot of you work in life and death situations, and so it will feel very urgent to you. But here's the reality. I think of how many of you know someone who has died of cancer? Anybody? So, like my father died a year ago, pancreatic cancer. Here's the thing. Most of us, when we think about an approach from like the American Cancer Society, we don't think of it as being urgent in the same way we think about Notre Dame or Haiti being urgent, right? Our mind doesn't go there. We think of cancer as a permanent problem, as part of the human condition, right? It's just there and it will always be there. It's horrible. We're thinking about it, I think, in the wrong way. There are millions of people dying from cancer that don't have to if we fixed it, but we don't have naturally that sense of urgency. Do you see that? And I should understand the psychology better than I do, but I can tell you that we don't, right? So I want you to take a few minutes, take 2 minutes, and as objectively as you can, score your campaign on urgency, okay? So to get a 5 on politics, you want no politics in your campaign. Now, how many of you have ever seen a politician raise money? Right? We've all seen politicians raise lots of money. Donald Trump, in fact, recently set a record for the most money ever raised at this point in a presidential campaign. So why do I say that politics should be out of the campaign? Why do you think that is? Yeah, it eliminates half. That's right. The bottom line is Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders don't raise money because of their politics so much as in spite of it, right? This is a hurdle that they overcome. There are other things that overwhelm it that we're talking about, like the urgency of a presidential campaign and the importance of the issues, right? That's why they're successful. It's not because it's political so much. And for us in the nonprofit world, it's really important that we stay away, as a general rule, right? That it's better if we do. Let me see if I can make this point another way. If I'm raising money for an abortion clinic in a crowdfunding campaign, would there be some people who might be donors, but who may be unwilling to share or to fundraise because of the community they live in? Yeah, right? That's what I'm talking about. Now, politics does enter in a way that's sometimes not top of mind, and I want to call your attention to this subtle politics. Again, I'm going to go back to the cancer community. I don't mean to be mean to the cancer community, but there are lots of different types of cancer, right? And there are some kinds of cancer that are less common than others. And so one thing that's happened is that breast cancer has literally taken on kind of a sexy image. And so sometimes people who are raising money for other kinds of cancer get jealous about the success of breast cancer campaigns. So that doesn't ruin the campaign for anybody, but if I were raising money for breast cancer, I wouldn't give myself a 5 because I'm apolitical. I would say, there's this tension out there in the cancer community. I'm a 4. Okay? It's not the end of the world, but it is an issue, right? It's not a 5, it's a 4. Okay, so with that as context, take 2 minutes and give yourself a score on politics. And remember, a high score is not political, a low score is very political. So did everybody get a score? Now, I had a couple of people ask, so let me just reiterate. You get a 5 for being not political at all, no political controversy at all around your campaign, and a low score if it's very political, if it's controversial, okay? Now, let's talk about geography for a minute. Now, most of you, for all of the projects that we're working on today, they're local projects, and that is good. Now, I know at least one of you is running in real life a nonprofit that serves people in Africa, so Burundi and Rwanda. And you have a special challenge. And I suspect it's more acute here than in some other places. In New York City, it would probably be less of a challenge. In Mississippi, it's probably more of a challenge. But we are more prone to give to solve problems in our own community than we are to giving in a faraway community. That's just a fact. Again, we can argue over whether it should be that way. What is the argument that people in our own community are worth more than human beings in another place? I don't know what that argument is. But we are certainly more inclined to do things to serve people in our own community. Now, I know some of you who are in the business of raising money for local nonprofits think I'm cracked. But can we all agree raising money is hard, right? So I'm not saying that it's easy if you're local. I'm saying it's easier, right? It's not magic. It's not like none of the other things, right? It's a scale, right? So the more local you are, the better you are. I think this one is going to be quick. Let's just take 1 minute to give yourselves a score on this. Okay, so were you able to identify whether or not you're local? Okay. I hope that wasn't too hard. So let's go on to the next thing. Community. Okay, so community, when I talk about community, I am not talking about a geographic community. I'm talking about a community of interest. And this is really important. This is really important because a community of interest should in fact extend beyond your local geography. This may be your tether to a broader world, right? Your tether to more money. Your tether to New York City, right? Your tether to rich communities outside of Mississippi. Not that there aren't rich communities here in Mississippi too, but it's nice to be able to import some dollars, right? Wouldn't you like to be able to import some dollars into your program? So this community of interest may be your tether to that. So again, I want you to take a minute and talk about that, but there's a key thing here. It is not enough that the community of interest exists. Trying to find the spot without an echo. You also need to be able to communicate with that community, right? And if there isn't an existing way for you to do that, you need to figure out, is there a way that we can create in 30 to 60 days to communicate with that community? If not, it may not matter that it exists. I'll give you an example. I was helping the First United Methodist Church of downtown Salt Lake raise money to restore their organ. Now, some of you may know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is headquartered in Salt Lake City, and maybe you've seen or heard of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, right? So they have a big famous organ right there in downtown Salt Lake. Turns out the Methodists have an older organ right there. And so it's kind of cool. It's kind of this historic fact. And as we were planning and plotting their crowdfunding campaign, I expected that they would be able to connect with Methodists around the country, maybe around the world, to raise money. It didn't happen. It didn't work. And the reason was there was no mechanism that really existed for them to communicate with Methodists around the world. So they weren't able to tap into that community. So they were very successful in the end. They raised all their money, but they didn't get it from that community. So take a couple of minutes and talk about whether or not that community exists and how, and whether and how you can actually communicate with that community. Okay, 2 minutes. Sounds like that was a good discussion, that you were working through some issues there. In the end, can you give yourselves a score based on your discussion? Mark down a score, 1 to 5, on your community. Okay? And then we're going to move on. Here's the last of our 6 measures. The last of our 6 here is a project or an event. And this is an entirely constructed artifice, if you will. Now, this group is working on building or remodeling a home, right? Remodeling a home? That is a very concrete project, inherently, right? You can see that that is a project that has an end, right? You build the house or you remodel the house and you can see that it is done. Crowdfunding lends itself to that sort of thing. There is an emotional connection to that. Universities figured this out a long time ago. Hospitals figured this out a long time ago, right? When they do a capital campaign for a building, they've got all the art, they figured out people love to give to those projects. There's something in our minds that triggers with a project that creates a little bit of urgency. So if your program doesn't have that natural connection, it may make sense to create an event that will create that sort of artificially. So I'll give you an example. So there was this fellow named Jimmy in New Zealand who suffered from depression. And his psychologist or psychiatrist challenged him to set a big goal and achieve it. And he did something kind of silly. He bought one of those little swimming pool floaties, like you'd lay in the swimming pool, and he floated down the longest river in New Zealand. It was about 2 miles. No, it was like 300 miles long. New Zealand's not a very big country. I was making a little New Zealand is small joke there, but anyway, so he floated down this 300-mile river on this little swimming pool floaty, and they made a documentary film about him floating down, and anyway, it was kind of a big deal, but it really helped his depression. So he wanted to do something, a next thing, and what he settled on was operating the world's largest water slide for a weekend. And so he found a hill in New Zealand on a farm, and you can't see the top of the slide because of the undulations in the hill, but it's quite a big water slide. And so he got a farmer that said you could use the land for free, but it cost him about $30,000 to do the event. But he ultimately was able to raise $95,000 using crowdfunding strategy. He was brilliant with the media. He did a great job. But people from all around the world donated, even though they couldn't go use the water slide because of the cause and the effectiveness of his marketing. But what he did is he gave them, for $10, he would let them have a proxy rubber ducky that would race down the water slide. And he mailed the winning ducky to the person who had sponsored that one. So anyway, he created an event to make the crowdfunding campaign successful. So you can think about creating an event or making an event. And let me add here that one of the ways to think about a program would be to think about breaking it down into discrete chunks. We're all familiar with the idea we see of the, sponsor a child in Africa for $1 a day and that we'll feed them. We've seen those kinds of campaigns for a generation now. it may make sense to break down your program on a per child or per person basis and do individual campaigns, lots of little campaigns around each individual person rather than one big one. What we're seeing is that is proving to be successful in some areas, right? So think about breaking it down. So take a minute and talk about whether or not you can create a project or an event or break down your campaign in some way to get to that more discrete person, individual level, okay? So I'll give you 2 minutes on that. So, were you able to score yourself on a project? I realize 2 minutes is not a long time to come up with a project and score it, but I appreciate you giving it a run. Okay, so now I want you to go to page 19. Go to page 19 in your workbook. On page 19 in your workbook, there's a little worksheet there where you can write down your scores from each of the things and tally it up. So the best possible score is what? 6 times 5 is 30. So that's the best possible score. And so theoretically, the worst possible score, if you were using ones, would be about a 6, right? So tally up your scores. Should just take a moment. Let me see if I can steal your attention. Okay, so raise your hand. Raise your hand if your group had 25 or more. Okay? Don't raise your hand if you had 15 or less. Just think about it. There are a couple who said maybe they did have 15 or less. Okay, you're probably just more objective. And how many are between 15 and 25? Okay, so here's what I think will happen. There's a little bit of simple math we can do here to explain, but if you score 15 or below, what that suggests is that all of the money you raise will come from your network, right? People will give to you because they know, love, and trust you, right? And you know, your project is worthwhile. I don't mean to suggest it's not worthwhile, but people will give to you because they know, love, and trust you. If you are between 15 and 25, then you will probably raise a little bit more from outside of your immediate network, because some people will give because they hear about what you're doing and it will be more likely to resonate with them. And the way I do this mathematically is to adjust your number by a different factor. So if you take on page 11, you wrote down an estimate of how much money you could raise. Remember the partners, boosters exercise? Put that at the top on page 21, and then do the math there that explains it. So if you score better than 25, then I want you to divide your dollar amount by 0.25, which is the same as multiplying by 4. And then if you scored between 15 and 25, I want you to divide by 0.75, which suggests that you will raise about a third of your money, a quarter to a third of your money from other people. And if you score below 15, you just divide by 1. And that gives you what you started with. So now you should have a new estimate for how much money you can raise with your crowdfunding campaign. Does that make sense? Great question over here is, what are we trying to do? What is this math attempting to do? We're trying to estimate how your score impacts your crowdfunding ability. And it's not very intuitive. But the math does that. It's a little more it's a little more intuitive if I say if you had a really high score and one or two groups did, and you get to multiply by 4. That would make sense, right? So what we're really saying is we're multiplying by 1.3 if you don't. If you get a medium score, and if you get a low score, you multiply by 1. That is, it doesn't change, right? You're gonna raise the money you estimated you could in the beginning from your network. That's what you'll get, in all likelihood. The exercise we've just undertaken is extremely subjective. I challenged you to be as objective as you could be. And what we may have measured more effectively than anything is how optimistic you are, rather than how objective you are or how well your project will do. But I want you to understand and just think through those things, the factors that influence crowdfunding success. Now, we hear about things going viral videos and viral crowdfunding campaigns, and we'd all like to see that happen. And we saw that with the Ice Bucket Challenge, right? Now, when the Ice Bucket Challenge happened, Oprah Winfrey participated. Bill Gates participated, right? It was really astounding. I assumed that they were sort of in on the joke. That is, that they had been asked and they chose to do that. That is not the case. Best information I have is that no one in that celebrity sphere was asked to do this. They participated just like everyone else, which is remarkable, astounding to think about all the celebrities that participated. It just caught on fire, right? We all want that to happen. How many Ice Bucket Challenges things have worked since then the same way? We've never recaptured that magic, have we? And trust me, every nonprofit in the world has tried something, right? You've all tried probably in one way or another to recapture that magic. It's very difficult. $1 million campaigns do work. There are $1 million campaigns that are successful in crowdfunding. But I will tell you, there are a few things that happen along the way. And it's why I think of this as, in large part, a different exercise than what we're doing today. Those campaigns usually involve a celebrity that's pretty committed. They usually have big marketing budgets and large infrastructure, right? It's not usually a small local nonprofit. Even the ALS Association was a big national organization, right? So, I want to talk a little bit about the crowdfunding sites that we might use. And because they're our sponsor, I want to start with talking about Caring Crowd. Now, Caring Crowd is a crowdfunding site like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, but it is only for nonprofits. And it's only for nonprofits that have some sort of health outcome, health-related outcome. And the reason is that the part of Johnson & Johnson that sponsors this is an organization that works on global health. And although this is not conducted under the formal organization structure at Johnson & Johnson responsible for corporate social responsibility, that's really what this is, right? Johnson & Johnson does not make money off of this website. They lose money. They lose a lot of money on this website. That's why it's there. Their goal is to lose more on this website. Why? They want to burnish their brand, right? They want to be respected in the global health arena for making a difference. And this is one of the ways they have created to make a difference in the world. Now, one of the things that Johnson & Johnson does is that Johnson & Johnson takes no revenue. Now, they do charge the credit card clearing fees. They pass those along. How many of you pay credit card clearing fees when you process credit card donations? If any of you have found a way to avoid that, I'd like to know about it. So Johnson & Johnson does charge that. But then, and this is why I sometimes wonder why they bother to charge that fee, they match most of the donations on the website. Let me say that again. Johnson & Johnson matches most of the donations made on Caring Crowd. So this is the way it works. They match donations up to $250 whenever they have money in the matching fund. And every time they have run out of money in the matching fund, they've gone back to corporate to get more money and have always been given more. But that does mean that occasionally there are gaps. There are days when there are no matching funds. So one of the things that I would suggest you do if you run a campaign on Caring Crowd, and I would encourage you to do that, would literally be to call them. When you submit, you'll get a contact from them. When you start putting in your campaign at caringcrowd.org, you'll start getting communications from them. You reach out and just say, I would like to launch my campaign when you have money in the matching fund, right? I mean, I would literally just tell them that. I know that sounds weird, but they have this weird protocol that sometimes the money runs out and then they get new money. So just coordinate to make sure that when you launch your campaign, they have money that week, okay? Because John, the guy that runs the program, is the nicest guy in the whole world. And he wants everyone to succeed. He wants everyone to get matches. And so if you coordinate with him, he'll make sure there are matching funds when you launch, okay? Yeah. His name is John Brennan. John Brennan. Excuse me, Brennick. Not Brennan, Brennick. John Brennick. BRENNICK. John Brennick at Caring Crowd. And the way he wants you to start a relationship is to go to Caring Crowd and begin working on your submission. And you don't have to get very far, but once you set up an account and save it and just start populating the fields for your campaign, he or one of his team will reach out to you and open the dialogue, right? And you can start your campaign. It's a very personalized approach. At any given time, they usually have about a dozen campaigns on the website. So it's not like Kickstarter where there are thousands, or Indiegogo or GoFundMe where there are thousands. There are 12 at any one time. So I would generally stick to one platform. That would be my general advice. Would there be exceptions to that? For sure. I am really not a fan of GoFundMe for nonprofit crowdfunding campaigns. In fact, I think GoFundMe is one of the greatest challenges nonprofits face, right? And I'll tell you a story in a minute that will make that point. But yeah, if I were a nonprofit, I would really be careful not to give GoFundMe my business. Sorry. I really appreciate what they're doing in so many ways, but I'll share a story that I hope will make a point. But there are lots of other platforms that are great for nonprofits, and some of these platforms have better tools and functionality than the Caring Crowd website, okay? Most of these, CrowdRise, Classy Fundraiser, Mighty Cause, most of these offer a whole suite of products. And this is where some of the arguments around what is crowdfunding come up, because these platforms have one tool for something they call crowdfunding and a different tool for something they call peer-to-peer fundraising, and another tool for a 10K or events. And so you have to kind of figure out which of their tools might be the right for you for what you're trying to do. But great tools. All of these have great tools. So these are other options for you. So be sure to write those down.
Do these charge?
Most of them are moving to, I don't know if any of them still charge in the traditional sense. Most are moving to a model where they charge your donors. And so it feels to you like they're not charging. It feels to your donors like they're charging a lot. Because what they do is they say to your donors, would you like to make a 10 or 15% tip or donation to the platform? Yeah, and so to your donors, they actually end up sometimes paying more than you were paying before. I'm not sure I'm excited about that, but it does feel to you like when someone makes a $100 donation, you get all $100, but they're actually paying oftentimes $110 or $115 to give you that $100 because the crowdfunding platform itself. I wouldn't let the fees drive this decision. I would think about what makes the most sense for you. So if you have health outcomes and you want to take advantage of the match at J&J, that's probably the way to go, right? Now, let me just add one more thought on that, on this match issue and Caring Crowd. Most of you in this room are talking about doing things that have health outcomes, right? You're not all doing health interventions, but education improves health, right? The connection between education and health. Helping someone with a disability to improve their lifestyle is a health outcome, right? You don't have to be operating a hospital, though some of you are doing things that are very directly health activities. Your activity doesn't have to be health related. Your outcomes have to have that connection. And so that may come down to your ability to convince the J&J expert panel that there is a health outcome more than it has to do with your activities. Okay, we need to move on. There's so much more we need. We're going to get to the most fun part of the day now. Are you ready to have some fun? Okay. So we're going to talk about preparation. So everything we've talked about up to now is really what I would call reconnaissance, right? We've been talking about crowdfunding, but we haven't really done anything, right? When you start preparing, now we're going to do some stuff, right? We're going to actually start doing things. And when you see a crowdfunding campaign, it's very much like seeing an iceberg, right? There's a tiny little bit sticking above the ground, above the water level that you see, and the rest is below. It's like the ice in your soda, right? The ice doesn't sit on top of the water or on top of your soda, it's down in, and just a tiny bit poking up. The preparation is like that. So there's a lot of activity going on that we all need to be engaged in if we're going to be successful with the crowdfunding campaign. So this is kind of the checklist. We're going to produce a video. We're going to build and organize teams, and got to train the team. Got to share with them the information you got today. You're going to organize lists of people to contact. This is all in the book. And you're going to design your rewards and recognition, and then you've got to write one or more press releases as well. So we're going to go through as an exercise and do some of that work today. And we're going to start with the video. So go to page 43. We're going to start working on the video. We're going to skip ahead a little bit. We'll come back to some of those the things we're skipping this afternoon. The crowdfunding video is a great exercise for us, and we're going to make one. Each team is going to create a crowdfunding video today. And at the end of the day, we're going to have a film festival. We're going to watch all of the films that you make. So we're going to have our own mini Sundance right here, okay? The reason that I like to do this is not because I really don't think you're going to use the video we make today in your crowdfunding campaigns. You probably won't. But I think you will learn not only a little bit about making a video, but you'll learn more about the whole fundraising process, to be thinking about how you tell your story in a way that is compelling. It'll also give you confidence that making a video is something you can do. I mean, every single one of us walked in here with a video camera, right? No one forgot their video camera at home today. You probably didn't say when you left the house, oh, I've got to take my video camera, but no one left it at home, did you, right? So we'll go through this, and we're going to talk a little bit about the video. One of the key things is that if you are running the campaign, you may not be the face of the campaign. But if you are running the campaign, you need to be in the video. People need to meet you as part of the video. Now, defining who runs the campaign is tricky, but someone from the organization, someone to whom the money is going, someone that is the steward of the resources needs to be in the video to say, trust me, I'm going to do what I say we're going to do, and we're going to have great outcomes, trust me. You want to have the face of your campaign in your video if possible. Now, for today, that's going to be tricky, because some of you would like to have a student or someone who's not in the room be the face of your campaign. And it's okay for someone here to act in that role. And I want to have fun today doing this. I would also invite you to be a little bit sensitive in the way we approach those, not make it a total caricature of someone that we're trying to serve. We want to be respectful of the people we love and care for. But let's have fun. Let's not take ourselves, each other, or our projects too seriously. I understand, you understand, this will not be the final video, right? Where this is an exercise. Everyone's video is going to be less than amazing in some way, not perfect. When you're doing a crowdfunding video, one of the key things is to be brief, to keep it short, right? I used to say 3 minutes was magic. I still say 3 minutes is kind of an upper limit. But if you can keep it under 2 minutes, that's better. If you can keep it under a minute and get it all in, that's even better. I don't know how you do that, but if you can do it in under a minute, that would be great. When you're really making your video, and some of you, I know there are a few laptops in the room. I'm glad to see laptops. Almost all laptops have some video editing software on them. There are some video editing software for phones and iPads and other things as well. I'm not adept at using any of those portable device technologies, although I do a lot of video editing on my computer. But you can use, one of the great things about video is that you can incorporate great images. So, for instance, I want to just come over here and pay attention to Rwanda for a minute. Rwanda is a spectacular, beautiful place, right? It's like Mississippi. It's gorgeous. And so if you were making a video about the people you're serving in Rwanda, it may be difficult to get video, but chances are it's easy to get photos. So you can layer in photos into a video using some video editing, basic video editing software pretty easily, and do a voice over those images or just some music. So take advantage of the technology to allow you to do that. And so those of you who have some video editing software and you may have access to some of the videos of video or images, still images of the people you serve or your community or your project, whatever. You can tie that stuff in. Don't feel constrained to what you have. That said, when I've done this in the past, some people will use special effects. And what I mean by that is they will take out a piece of paper and they'll draw a picture of it and they'll hold it up, right? Special effects. Their own version of CGI imaging, right, is a doodle on a piece of paper. That works. Hold it up and videotape that. So whatever you want to do, get creative, use that. But remember that you want to try to tell a story, right? The point of a crowdfunding video is to create something of a narrative that will make people want to see to the end. And then, of course, once they've seen the whole thing, they'll want to give to your campaign. You want to ask and answer the basic questions: who, what, where, why, and when, and how. And there are two asks that you have to include, right? First is to donate, right? And there's great data on this. I don't understand why it works this way. But if you were to show people two videos, and they're identical in every way, except one includes a specific ask for you to donate, and the other does not, the one with the ask will raise more money, right? So be sure to include the ask to donate. And then the other thing is ask people to share. Be very deliberate about that, because sharing on social media does help raise money. Not as much as you think, but it's an easy ask. It's an easy way for people to help you, so let's encourage them to do that. So let me give you just some quick ideas about the script, because you're going to want to take a few minutes here and we'll start working on a script. You want to start with some sort of a hook. That could be a joke, but in a crowdfunding video for a nonprofit, that probably isn't what you would do. If you are a stand-up comedian by night and you really are funny, you could do that. But you might want to start with a startling fact or an important observation about the people, the community that you're serving. So you might want to say something. If you were doing the Rwanda video, you might say that 30% of children in Rwanda don't make it past the 6th grade, or whatever the statistic might be. So you could start with an interesting fact. But anyway, start with a hook. Then create a vision for a world without a problem that you want to solve, right? So talk about how things could be, should be, ought to be, and then identify the problems that prevent us from living in that world, especially the problems that you can solve or wish to solve. And then talk about how you will solve those problems, how you will address those concerns. Then talk about why you need the money to address those concerns, to do what you want to do, to make that intervention, and then take that back to the vision. Make clear, okay, so if you give us the money, we will implement our interventions, and the vision that we started with can be achieved. And then finally, give the two asks, right? Ask for money, ask for the share. So that's the share. Ask for people to share the campaign, share the video. Does that make sense? Okay. Now my slide says, let's shoot. And if you're ready, go right ahead. But I would suggest you take about 15 minutes to write a script. Take about 15 minutes to write a script. And hold on. Keep your focus here for just 60 seconds more, right? I know we've been going for a couple of hours, but I really want to encourage you to stay in the room, stay tight in your groups until you get your script done. Now, she is a professional documentary filmmaker, right? So she's probably going to win the film festival today. And she probably thinks some of what I'm saying is cracked, and that's, I would love to get feedback from you. But take 15 minutes, write your script. Don't leave the room. And then at about 10 minutes to 12, we'll turn you loose to start making videos. And I think, Jeffrey's left, I think there's going to be some lunch that materializes around noon. We can work through the lunch hour on actually making the video. So starting at about 10 minutes to 12, you can literally start making the video. If no one in your group has any video editing software or skill, let me suggest a different approach. Rather than focus on the editing, focus instead on takes. So it's going to be 1 or 2 minutes long, right? So in 30 minutes, you could do 15 takes of a 2-minute video, right? So just practice. And practice makes perfect. You can come up with a great video. So any questions? So the next 15 minutes, we're working on a script, right? Okay, thank you.